What if the oldest hard drive on Earth wasn't made of metal or plastic, but bone? It sounds impossible, but archaeologists may have uncovered a 40,000-year-old system for storing information. And if that's true, human intelligence began looking modern far earlier than anyone expected. For a long time, people imagined early humans as simple survivors, hunting, hiding from the cold, and trying to stay alive in a brutal world. But what if those people were doing something much more advanced? What if, tens of thousands of years before books, computers, or even writing, humans were already recording information in a structured way? That's exactly what some scientists now believe. Across caves and ancient sites in Europe, archaeologists kept finding tiny carved marks on bone, ivory, tools, ornaments, and small sculptures. These weren't giant cave paintings or obvious artwork. They were much smaller and easier to overlook. Little dots, short lines, crosses, and notches scratched into surfaces. At first, many researchers thought they were just decoration. Maybe random marks, maybe symbols with no real system behind them. But now that idea is changing fast. A new study suggests these carvings may have been part of something much bigger, an early data system. And if that's true, it could completely change how we understand the human mind. These artifacts were found in places like Germany, France, and Spain. Many of them date back between 34,000 and 45,000 years ago, during the Ice Age. This was a time when glaciers covered huge parts of Earth. Mammoths still roamed the land. Life was difficult, dangerous, and unpredictable. Yet somehow, people living in that world may have been creating systems to store and organize information. That's not just impressive, that's revolutionary. To test the idea, researchers studied more than 3,000 symbols carved into around 260 ancient objects. Instead of trying to guess what the symbols meant, they asked a different question. Do these marks behave like real information? To answer that, they used computational tools and statistical models, the same kind of math scientists use to study language and even train artificial intelligence. What they looked for was something called information density. In simple terms, that means how much useful information can be packed into a sequence of symbols. Think of it like this. Random scratches don't store much, but a structured pattern, one that repeats in meaningful ways, can hold real data. And that's exactly what the researchers found. Some of these Ice Age carvings repeated in organized patterns. Crosses appeared in rows. Dots were spaced carefully. Lines and notches showed up again and again in ways that didn't look random. That matters because real systems often rely on repeated patterns. That's how calendars work, that's how codes work, and that's how data works. Even more surprising, the researchers found that these ancient symbol sequences had information levels similar to proto-cuneiform, one of the earliest known writing systems from ancient Mesopotamia. The shocking part? Proto-cuneiform appeared around 3000 BCE. That means these carvings may represent structured information from roughly 40,000 years earlier. Let that sink in. Humans may have been experimenting with symbolic data systems long before writing officially appeared. The team also studied something called entropy. That might sound complicated, but the idea is simple. Entropy measures how predictable or unpredictable a pattern is. If a sequence is too random, it doesn't look organized. If it's too repetitive, it doesn't carry much information. But these carvings sat in a very interesting middle ground. They weren't chaotic, and they weren't meaningless. They had the kind of balance you'd expect from a system designed to carry useful information. So what were these ancient people actually recording? That part is still a mystery. The symbols may have tracked seasons, animal migrations, moon cycles, important events, or even group identities. Some may have marked rituals or shared knowledge. Nobody knows for sure yet. But the key discovery is this. They seem to have followed a system, and that changes everything. One fascinating example comes from southwestern Germany, where archaeologists found a tiny figurine carved from mammoth ivory. It's small enough to fit in your hand. Along its surface runs a neat row of engraved crosses and dots. Another object, known as the adorant, is a thin ivory plate showing a strange figure that looks almost part human and part lion. Across its body are carefully spaced rows of tiny marks. Then there's the famous lion-human sculpture, one of the oldest known examples of figurative art. Look closely at one of its arms, and you'll see evenly spaced cuts running along the limb. These marks don't look sloppy or random. They look deliberate, measured, almost like entries in a record. That's why some people have started calling these objects something like ancient USB drives made of ivory. And honestly, that comparison isn't as silly as it sounds. Because if these marks stored information, then these objects weren't just art. They were also memory tools, portable storage, Ice Age data devices. And there's another reason this matters. These symbols weren't found in just one place. They appeared across different parts of Europe. That raises a huge possibility. What if different groups of hunter-gatherers recognized and shared the same symbolic patterns? If that's true, then early humans may have been passing information across long distances using signs that others understood. Not full writing, at least not yet, but maybe the building blocks of it. And once you see that, a bigger picture starts to appear. No, this wasn't the moment intelligence suddenly began. It was part of a much longer story, a story showing that ancient humans were building knowledge systems for tens of thousands of years. And this idea becomes even more powerful when we look at other discoveries. Take an old limestone slab found in the Netherlands. For over a century, archaeologists thought it might be a Roman game board, but nobody could figure out how it worked. The carved grooves didn't match any known game. Then, with help from modern 3D scanning and AI, researchers finally got closer to solving the mystery. The scans revealed tiny wear marks in the stone. Some grooves were slightly deeper than others, likely from repeated use over time. That meant people weren't just carving lines. They were interacting with them again and again. Researchers then used AI to test thousands of possible rule combinations. By comparing likely game moves to the wear patterns on the real board, the system narrowed down the possibilities. The result? It appears the Romans were likely playing a strategic blocking game much earlier than historians once believed. A game based on trapping, planning, and predicting the other player's next move. That discovery matters because it shows ancient people weren't just surviving. They were thinking ahead, practicing strategy, training their minds. And if we go even farther back in time, the picture becomes even more amazing. In Olduvai Gorge, Tanzania, researchers found 1.5 million-year-old bone tools made from elephant and hippo bones. These weren't random broken bones. They had been shaped into sharp tools. And the method used to make them required skill. The makers likely used knapping, a technique where flakes are carefully removed to create an edge. That's hard enough with stone. But bone is much trickier. It bends differently, it reacts differently, strike it the wrong way, and it can crack or fail. So whoever made those tools understood the material well enough to shape it on purpose. That means planning, experimenting, learning, improving. In other words, engineering. And when you connect all these discoveries, a powerful truth starts to emerge. Our ancestors were not mentally switched off until civilization appeared. They were building systems, solving problems, and storing knowledge long before cities, schools, or computers existed. So maybe the biggest surprise isn't that ancient carvings turned out to be data. Maybe it's that human intelligence has been quietly building for far longer than we ever imagined. Those tiny carvings may not look important at first, but they could be proof that humans were storing knowledge tens of thousands of years ago. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more amazing discoveries that change what we know about the past.